Folks, hello, it's me, Denny Carter, back with you for yet another show. This one is episode 12. 12 episodes in, folks. We're going all the way to 1,000. That's the goal. 1,000 dad season shows, and then I'm done. And then I'm just finished. You don't even know. As always, I'm streaming this show live on the X platform, formerly known as Twitter. It's also streaming on YouTube. You can find it on iTunes, on Spotify, everywhere else. I would very much appreciate the likes for this post and some subscriptions. It's free. That's the thing. You can't afford not to subscribe to the Dad Season Show. I've done the math. I've run the numbers. And it turns out, and you'll have to trust me on this. It turns out you're losing money if you're not subscribing to the Dad Season Show. I only report facts. Okay, this is an objective show. I'm an objective guy. I would tell you if it made no sense for you to subscribe to the Dad Season Show, but it makes all the financial sense in the world. And by the way, this is free. This is free advice. Okay, so I'm providing a financial service to you and saying subscribe to my show in order to save money. All right, and how many podcast hosts are doing that for you? This is my question. I would say 0. Well, now 1, which is just me. All right, listen. On today's meat of the show, on the show's meat, we're going to talk about childhood anxiety, and I'll talk about my experiences dealing with the kids' anxious feelings. It can be very difficult, especially if you yourself struggle with anxiety, and I do. And honestly, who doesn't? Like, I feel like part of the destigmatizing of anxiety issues is related to. Let me check the numbers. I'm checking my spreadsheet over here. Oh, it's related to every single human being having crushing anxiety in the 21st century. How can that be stigmatized when everyone struggles with it? Because it's a very anxious time, you see. Some would say there's never been a more anxious time. And then, of course, we have technology absolutely wrecking our brains, just ripping apart our brains every single day, creating anxious people where once there were none. Okay, now I mean, I don't mean to say that there's been a time in history with no anxiety. What I mean is a person who probably in another era wouldn't have struggled with anxiety. Now today they struggle with anxiety because they're hooked to their phones. And social media, just the social media part is enough to just break you, just make you constantly anxious, give you FOMO so bad, you want to be shot to the moon. The FOMO is just ridiculous with social media, isn't it? I feel it all the time. I've talked about that. We fear missing out on the fun, and what fun is that? No fun. It's no fun being logged on. It's a way to sicken your soul to log on, right? It sickens my soul. Every single day I log on and I 4 minutes of scrolling and I want to retreat into the forest and live by myself forevermore. But I do it every day. Neil Dutton's in the chat. He says, I have FOMO about my FOMO. Neil may be kidding, but I do think that is a thing in a way. I think that you can have anxiety about your FOMO to say, basically, what exactly is wrong with me that I have this intense underlying feeling, of FOMO all the time. And then you get anxious about having that feeling. So it's like a double anxiety, like a double whopper of anxiety. I haven't had a double whopper in a long time. I probably instantly gained 6 pounds. That's the thing, man. I used to come home from baseball practice, senior year of high school, and there was a McDonald's on my way home. And I would pull up to the drive-thru. I'd get a 20-piece chicken nugget and a Big Mac and a large Coke. And I would eat it all. I mean, every last morsel of that meal, and drink the entire enormous bucket o soda. And gain no weight, gain 0 pounds. If I did that today, I would gain between 8 and 10 pounds. I don't mean like in the long run. I actually mean instantly. Like I could weigh myself before that meal and then eat the meal and then get back on the scale, and I would be 8 to 10 pounds heavier. That's my theory. That's my working theory, which is why I only eat carrots now. It's healthy. It helps with eyesight. Ever heard of it? God, I hate being 40. I'd rather be 17 is the thing, but I'm not. And it is dad season. And that's why I'm doing the dad season show. Hopefully we can start the discourse here about how to help your kids with anxiety. But first, I have a bone to pick with NBA players. I was watching the TV the other day, and an unnamed 4-letter sports network had a special on NBA players being downright religious about their napping. Okay, where we're talking about daily naps for these guys. Oh, I have to sneeze, and I am holding it in, folks. Ooh, do not sneeze during a podcast, during a live stream. Okay, it's gone. Thank God Almighty. Sorry to get religious. Yeah, so this sports network, they interviewed Jamal Murray, who else? So Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, Giannis, who's by the way, Giannis is huge in my family because he's Greek, and I married into a Greek family, so we love our Giannis folks. Some other guys. And these guys, the short of it is this: they can't function without their naps. When I'm watching this, I'm thinking, oh, okay, I get it. So that like they go to practice in the morning, and then they come home and they take a 30-minute nap, and then they get ready to go back to the stadium for the game. But no, that was not it at all. Who was it? Jamal Murray? No, I'm sorry. It was Edwards from Minnesota. I'm sorry. I'm not a hoop head. Anthony Edwards, I believe. The Ant-Man. Is that the guy? Anyway, he said that he takes a 3.5 to 4 hour nap every day. Like a baby. Like a newborn. All right, so I have some questions. I don't expect them to be answered. If I'm waiting for my kids in the pickup line at school, and usually it's like 20 to 25 minutes, and I'm reading a book, desperately trying not to go on my phone, and I get sleepy. You're reading the book for 15 minutes, you get a little sleepy, so you shut your eyes. And if I doze off, and I'm not talking about, drift into a dead man's sleep. I'm talking about just dozing off a little bit. If I doze off, I'm going to be up till 2 a.m. because my sleep cycle or whatever it is has been shot straight to hell. If I actually fall asleep during the day, like if I'm like watching golf, which is an exciting sport, but occasionally you get a little sleepy watching it. If I fall asleep for real, even for like 20 minutes or a half an hour, it's over. It's over. Like I'm going to sleep. I'm going to eventually fall asleep at like 3 or 4 a.m. the next night. Like my sleep has to be regimented. I have to get up at a certain time. I have to go to bed at a certain time, and there can be no straying from it. And hey, you know what? That's fun. That's a fun existence. I like that. I enjoy never being able to nap. And I'm hearing these guys, Anthony Edwards, Jamal Murray, Steph Curry, say, yeah, I sleep for 3 hours a day. What? So my next question is, what time are you going to bed? Because these guys can't possibly say their game ends at just for round figure purposes, their game ends at 10 p.m., right? So they're home by midnight. They're not going to bed at midnight. They're probably going to bed at like 3 a.m, right? And they're getting like, I don't know, 5 hours of sleep. And then they go do their thing, and they go and they get the rest of their sleep later in the day. I think that that's what's happening there. I think that's what's happening. Because I can't imagine that they're sleeping 8 hours at night and then 3 hours or 4 hours during their nap during the daytime. I just don't believe it. I have read, and apparently there's some research into athletes, high-level athletes who are constantly working out, produce tons of serotonin, like many, many times the amount of serotonin that a normal human creates, okay? And that serotonin is then converted into melatonin, and you go to sleep. So maybe that's it. That's another question I have. Are these guys' serotonin levels just so off the charts that they can just instantly just go to sleep at any point? And that's not fair. I don't like that. I want to take a 3-hour nap. Not every day, but like once in a while. That'd be awesome. Be amazing. But no, if I close my eyes for more than 10 seconds during the day, my sleep at night is ruined. It's over. 4-hour nap? I'm upset. And I'm jealous. They also had this sports network, unnamed sports network, interviewed a sleep scientist who said that sleep is extremely important for athletes, which makes me want to CC Russell Wilson, who has for a decade or more now bragged about his lack of sleep. He's posted online in the middle of the night saying he's working out or icing his ankle or something. And the grind never stops. Hashtag grind never stops. Hashtag grind culture. I don't even know what this guy does. But Russ, man, I feel like you made a mistake there. I feel like maybe your career would have been different if you occasionally got a little shut-eye. I mean, not a ton, but like a little. Like you weren't rehabbing at 4 o'clock in the morning. Maybe instead you should have slept some, and then you wouldn't have fallen off the cliff to such an extent. Anyway, yeah, man. That is something. Yeah, Diego Lopez in the chat, friend of the show. Diego says, Denny's poor Wii golf showing has him tilted out of his mind. Yeah, I played Wii golf on the X platform, formerly known as Twitter, as a way to promote the Dad Season show. I don't know if it worked, but it was worth a try, and it was fun, even though I shot 4 under, which is just hideously bad, just humiliatingly bad. 4 under. Are you kidding me? A bad round is 6 under. Oh my God. I'll never live this down. Never. Neil Dutton back in the chat. He says, when I was young, I snuck out of the house to party. Now I sneak out of parties to go home and presumably go to bed. Yeah, I get that. So yeah, athletes are able to sleep at any point, apparently. And I'm mad. All right, down to the meat of the show. To the show's meat we go. I've been reading this book here. If you're listening to it, you're not going to see it, but I will read you the title. It's called Breaking Free of Child Anxiety and OCD, a scientifically proven program for parents. It's written by Eli Libowitz, who is a doctor. A lot of good stuff in here. I think a lot of it translates well to the 21st century parent. A lot of good takeaways. Obviously, I'm going to try to focus on just certain portions of this book. The middle of the book really gets into helping, at least trying to help your kids with the anxious feelings that just come with growing up. It just happen, and there's nothing we can do about it. But we don't have to kind of leave them on an island as parents. I don't think we should leave them on an island as parents. I think maybe a lot of millennials were probably left out there on that anxiety island. Like, well, that's, man, sounds tough. You worry all the time. Well, good luck with that. Good luck with that. Maybe we didn't even know what to call it. Maybe we couldn't even properly identify those feelings, because I do think like the general cultural discourse around mental health, well, it was way different in that there was none. It's actually shocking if you pull back a little bit and you see commercials, you hear stuff on the radio, online ads and whatnot. Everything is pushing mental health now as a product to be sold. And that's very cynical. And part of me really doesn't like that. That part of the cultural shift is like, hey, everybody cares about mental health now. So now everybody's going to sell it as a product to be bought and consumed. And who knows how good it is or how bad it is. But hey, it'll help your mental health. Don't you want that? Give us your money. That's the sort of message I think that we get from those sort of ads. But there was none of that growing up. Unless I just completely missed that. Nobody talked about mental health growing up. Very little talk about medication. Very, very little talk of therapy. I remember therapy being something reserved for like the Joker. Like if you were actually becoming the Joker, you would be sent to an asylum and you would get therapy. That's how I remember it as a kid. Obviously, that's very harmful. And we don't like that. And we don't talk about it like that anymore. Thank goodness. But that, for those maybe folks in the 20s who are listening to this or watching this, that's how we used to perceive of anxiety issues or disorders or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. Christopher Wood is in the chat. Christopher says, mental health was a weakness, an excuse. And I think that's right. And I think in some circles, it still is seen in that way as a weakness to be overcome. Certainly in like alpha male circles, online especially, any sort of talk of, anxiety and or depression is greeted with, well, simply don't be weak. Try to just be a man instead. And, obviously that's not helpful. And it's actually incredibly poisonous and toxic, especially to young men growing up who are struggling with these issues, looking for ways to get help, to talk about it. And then they see that thrown back in their face. Well, maybe you're just not a man. Have you ever considered that? You worry a lot. You're constantly anxious. Well, you're probably not a dude then. You're not a dominant alpha. That's the messaging that young men get. And that's not good. That's not good. I know I didn't mean to go on this rant. And I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to the Breaking Free of Child Anxiety book in just a second. But I do sense that there are a lot of very hurt, vulnerable young men out there. And I'm talking about, teenager into their 20s, guys who desperately want to be good, but are pulled in to the most vile communities online. And then they're too far gone, usually. All they want is community. And sometimes the only community that will have them or that actively recruits them are the worst of the worst. And then they're down the rabbit hole and they're gone. And it doesn't have to be that way. And I think a lot of this starts with guys. I'm just going to stick with guys for a minute. Guys being lonely. I think there's a lot of loneliness among men today because of the internet, which is obviously the worst thing to ever happen to humanity, hands down. And so it's alienated everyone from everyone. And so people grow up, latching on. We're social creatures. We want it. We need that connection. We need that community. We have to have it to survive. It's like water. It's like almonds for me. I don't mean to make light of it, but yeah, I mean, we gotta have it. It's a must. They're gonna find some community. I don't know the answer to this, but the fact that they're finding these toxic, horrific communities, these young guys, is not good for any of us. It's certainly not good for the men. But as a society, it's awful. It's real bad. And I don't know. Like I said, I'm not coming here with here's the solution to male loneliness. Unless it's unplugging the internet. That's probably the answer. Fortunately, we can't do that. All right, back to the book. Back to the meat of the show. Okay, so the author here, Dr. Eli Libowitz, has a little anecdote here. All right, consider two children who both get sick and throw up, and imagine that the experience is identical for both of them. They have the same level of discomfort, it lasts for the same amount of time, and they both have the identical bad taste in their mouths at the end. Are both of those children going to be equally determined to never throw up again? Not necessarily. One child, Rosie, may think, that was horrible, and I never, ever, ever want to go through that again. The other child, Hannah, may simply think yuck, or even yuck, but at least I feel a little bit better now. These two children will behave differently in the future. Rosie, the child who is determined never to throw up again, might begin to take special precautions, such as eating only certain, quote, safe foods, staying away from people who have been ill, and eating very slowly, all in order to ensure that she doesn't throw up again. Hannah probably won't go to such lengths. Remember, the actual experience of throwing up was the same for both girls, so why are they now behaving differently? And this is the key part. Because of the thoughts they have about throwing up. It is the same with anxiety, fears, worries, and stress. Can you see how it is not necessarily the level of your child's anxiety that is most important in determining whether it will be a problem in his life? If your child has an anxiety problem, it is likely that at some level he is trying very hard not to feel anxious. Wow. That actually is one part that hit me, which is why I have it underlined. This is entirely natural. In fact, keeping us away from the things that make us anxious is the whole reason we have an anxiety system in the first place. But when a child becomes determined not to experience anxiety, he is likely to start taking extra precautions, staying away from things that are not actually a danger, and avoiding normal situations in ways that impede his daily functioning. When a child becomes determined not to experience anxiety, he's likely to start taking extra precautions, etc., etc. So it's anxiety about anxiety. And we just mentioned that Neil Dutton, friend of the show, said he has FOMO about FOMO. Well, it sounds funny, in a way, but you can have anxiety about anxiety. I have had that. I have struggled with that for many years, many years. I don't even know. I don't know how long. I don't know, 20 years, 20 plus years on and off. You you get to a point where you're worrying about your worrying. It's a meta worrying is what it is. And when you get caught in that meta worrying loop, man, it's hard to get out. It's hard to break out. And it gets dark in there in that loop, right? I mean, I hope I'm talking to folks who understand. I think I am. But yeah, I mean, you're you're having anxiety about feeling anxious. You know, why is this happening? Like, why am I like this? Is it hereditary? Is it something I did wrong? Am I not drinking enough water? I'm not kidding. Am I not exercising enough? Am I not taking the right supplements? Am I not eating right? You know, these are all questions that crop up. And all of those questions promote more anxiety, at least in my experience. So yeah, I mean, it can be hereditary. I mean, this sort of thing has been proven to be passed down from mom or dad, sometimes both. And in that case, there's not really anything you can do to stop it completely. And then there's the thought or the theory that actually trying to stop it, like forcefully pushing back on those feelings, creates more anxiety, right? I don't know how people feel about Eckhart Tolle. He's a writer. I've read a couple of his books. Some of the things I'm into, some of the things, not so much. But he does talk about this idea of confronting anxiety with force and saying, I'm going to overcome it. I'm going to beat it up. And that creates more strife. And if desire is the root of all suffering, then if you desire not to be anxious, if you really, really desire it intensely not to be anxious, guess what? You're going to suffer. You're going to suffer more. That's a hard concept to explain to a kid. Obviously. I mean, it's a concept I didn't even consider until my 30s, like my late 30s. Okay. I'm 55, by the way. I'm kidding. I'm 40, but I feel 55. That's the point. Yeah. And so I do, that is something I've actually talked to my oldest child, my son, about trying not to fight, trying not to fight the feelings. I do think generally in Western culture, we're taught to fight, right? We fight, we wage a war on poverty. We wage a war on cancer. We wage a war on drugs. We fight against everything. Anything we don't like, we fight. We don't like anxiety. We're waging a war against anxiety. That doesn't sound like a great idea to me. And so what is the other option? How can you explain this to your kid? What do you just let the anxiety wash over you? Just feel it, man. Just feel that anxiety. Don't push back. Don't erect a wall. Just let it overcome you. Nah, that's not a very hopeful message. Not a very practical one either. Because no one wants to feel bad. No one. Like that's probably like why human civilization is not long for the world, for the earth, because we all like to feel good. And no one wants to spend 1 second feeling bad. And feeling good involves destroying the earth. That's just the way it is. The human need to feel good is really the end of our species. Sorry to say. Wow, didn't think I was going there. But anyway, so you say, okay, don't fight it. Don't let it wash over you. Here's a third option that I presented to my kid, which is to observe the anxiety. And you say, what the hell? What are you talking about? Observe it. It is a concept. It is very difficult to grasp if you believe that the anxiety is part of you, is like that it is you, that you are the anxiety, that there is no separation between those two entities, that you and the anxious feelings are one, but they're not. And it's by the way, it's really hard to remember this in the moment. Now, right now, as I'm talking about it, I can conceptualize it, I can understand it, I can recommend it. In moments of extreme anxiety, I sometimes slash never use it. I never actually apply it because you get wrapped up, you get carried away by it. I think that's natural. And don't beat yourself up over it. I try not to, but don't beat yourself up over it. But yeah, I think observing it is a way out. Oh man, like like you picture, if you have a good imagination. I believe I have a good I actually wish I didn't have as good of an imagination. I think that is actually a source of my anxiety over the years. If you have a good imagination, just picture these thought bubbles or thoughts kind of passing by. Oh, why? So I'm seeing an anxiety bubble about, did I pay the utility bill? One about my kid's upcoming dentist appointment, how much that's going to cost. My dog's appointment, all these appointments. We have appointments all day, every day as parents, and everything is just gouging your pocketbook, the old pocketbook. Yes, this is Dad's season show from 1959. We call it pocketbook here, and so yeah, I mean, but if you observe it, you say, okay, I don't have to let this overcome me. I can just see it, and hopefully let it pass. You don't have to be overwhelmed by it. You don't have to. It's easy to. And again, no judgment. No judgment for folks who do become overwhelmed with that. I do too. I do too. But I think that one helpful thought for you and your kid is that you don't actually have to let it. That is not an inevitability, because you are not one with those thoughts. Like you are. It is not you. It does not define you. That's just my thoughts on how to help your kid deal with it. I have more from the book in a second. We're gonna hit the comments here. Yeah, here we have Darren Danker in the chat. Darren says the spiraling is called ruminating, I think. Yeah, man, rumination is a tough deal. Right, and so what I think what Darren is referring to is the anxiety about anxiety and that loop it creates, and you're just worried about being worried about being worried about being worried, and it never stops and goes. It develops and it hardens and it thickens and it becomes this huge black mass in your head, right? And that's rumination. And I'm telling you that the only way to deal with that successfully is to withdraw from it. You can't fight that black mass. You can't. You're going to lose. That's a promise. I promise you will lose. So don't fight it. Toronto Dave is in the chat. Hello, Toronto Dave. Glad to have you here. Matt Blair is in the chat, friend of the show. Funniest guy on the X platform, formerly known as Twitter, and Blue Sky, where I also post. Whew. Matt Blair says, I can definitely relate to the getting anxiety about anxiety feeling. I don't want my kids to go through that. Yeah, man. I mean, what would you do? What would you do if a genie appeared to you? I mean, first you'd piss your pants. You might throw up. But then after that, he would say, what would you do to make sure your kid never experiences anxiety about anxiety? What would you say? What would you do? I would do anything, I think. I would draft a running back in the first round. I would go to those lengths. Toronto Dave finds it helpful to notice the psychological symptoms such as fast heart rate. Oh, no, I'm sorry, not physiological. Sorry, Dave. Physiological symptoms such as fast heart rate, etc. It helps better. It helps to recognize what's happening in that moment, and then to breathe. Yes, and then to breathe. Who knew? It when you were growing up, you didn't think it would actually be this hard to be an adult, right? I know I sound probably idiotic to some of you, but I mean, you have to deal with your own issues and your kids' issues. Man, come on. Come on. Are you serious? That's hard. That's hard. And I think that it separates modern dads, 21st century dads, from dads of yesteryear, dads from the quote 20th century, uh, because they didn't deal with that stuff. They just didn't. And that because it wasn't part of the job. It wasn't part of the gig of being a dad. You weren't there to help your kids through anxious or depressive moments or parts of their lives. It just wasn't the deal. And I think dads today we've taken on that role largely because the like I mentioned, the aforementioned cultural shift in mental health, and because our wives are at work and they're not at home all day, unlike maybe our dad's situation and obviously our grandparents, our grandfather's situation. And so we've had to split up, that traditional mom role and take on some of that. And some of that includes helping your kids with their feelings. It's still a very new thing. I think we should try to remember that it is a new thing, relatively speaking, for dads to deal with this sort of thing. And we're still learning. We're still learning how to talk about it, how to deal with it ourselves. So hopefully we're getting better. Hopefully. Diego Lopez says, to be honest, previous generations of dads were missing out by not being as involved. I do think that's true. And yeah, as Toronto Dave says, this is emotional. This is what is termed emotional labor. It does feel like work. I mean, when your kid comes home and they're upset about something and they're anxious about something, and you sit down and you work it out with them. I know I know to some folks it might sound funny. That's not labor. Labor is working. It's using your hands. It's working the oil rig. That's labor. But let me tell you, if you really put time and effort into talking to your kids about these things, you're going to come away mentally exhausted, tired, as if, stick with me here, you have labored, as if there has been labor happening for you. It's effortful is what I'm saying. Full of effort. So yes, that emotional labor role has largely been split up, increasingly, I should say, split up between mom and dad. In a way, like I said, that is new. We're still working it out, folks. Chris Wood is in the chat. Chris Wood says, the problem is we often don't feel like adults, but children that are making it up as we go. That is not untrue. Chris continues, big imposter syndrome. We didn't have teachers for this. Our parents just let us fend for ourselves. Yeah, I definitely don't want to talk. I don't want to speak for all millennials. Certainly all Zoomers, since I don't actually know any Zoomers except for Kyle Dvorak at NBC Sports. But as the official spokesman of millennials, I don't want to say that all millennials were left to fend for themselves. I think largely we were. 80s and 90s kids, yes, we were. We weren't told that we were on our own, but literally, like the words were not spoken to us. Hey, buddy, you're on your own. But I think the message was clear. And then, so a lot of us turned inward or found a destructive way to deal with it, drugs or alcohol or whatever. Yeah, I mean, I do recall, I don't mean to make this episode about my situations, but if you guys have something to add, throw it in the chat. But I do remember there would be sometimes as a kid where I would just not feel good. And I didn't know why. And it bothered me that I wasn't feeling good. I wasn't feeling positive. You won't believe this, but I was a cynical kid. And that cynicism would really run amok in those situations. But I didn't really know, and I didn't even know that I was supposed to talk about it, or not supposed to. I didn't even know that was an option. I didn't know that, like, you could come up to your parents or an adult and say, "Hey, I'm having some bad feelings and maybe some bad thoughts. What do I do? How do you deal with this? Because I don't like this very much. I'd rather not feel these things." I didn't know that you could do that. Uh, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of folks my age or thereabouts would agree with that. Yeah, right. We have someone in the chat, goes by RB. Says, my son is going through potty training. I have anxiety just thinking about not giving him anxiety. Thank you for that. A little light moment. Yeah. Oh man, that is an anxious time. I mean, yeah, it's a hair trigger thing, right? As soon as they're like, "Oh, I have to poop," I mean, you are on it, right? You're on it. You grab the kid and you're off to the toilet. Sit down in that potty. We're gonna stay here until you poop. We're not moving. All right. back to the book. All right. So, in this book, Breaking Free of Child Anxiety and OCD, written by Dr. Eli Libowitz, says, if your child believes she is weak, vulnerable, or helpless to cope with anxiety, then she is going to want to avoid feeling anxious if at all possible. Likewise, if your child believes that anxiety, once it has been triggered, will never go away on its own and will only go down through avoidance or accommodation, then of course she is going to do everything in her power to avoid becoming anxious. And if she does become anxious, she will try very hard to get you to accommodate so that she can feel better. Yeah, that is a trap. It's a trap that a caring parent can easily fall into. And I have definitely done this. I've fallen into this trap, the accommodation trap, where you say, and I mentioned this on previous shows, I forget which one. There's so many dad season episodes now, I don't remember. I can't reference them easily. But I have mentioned at some point over these 12 episodes that there's a selfishness at play in trying to prevent your kids from feeling bad feelings. You're doing anything you can to make sure they don't feel bad feelings. Not necessarily because you want to save them from that discomfort, but because you just don't want to deal with that shit. Right? I don't have it in me. I can see something's happening that you're not going to like, or you're telling me that you're feeling this certain way about this certain thing, whatever it is. And I'm going to insert myself into the situation, and I'm going to accommodate so hard you won't believe it. And I'm going to make sure you don't feel that anxiety. I'm going to be like I mentioned in a previous episode, the human shield for anxiety. I will lay down my proverbial life so that you don't feel 1 minute of anxious feelings. 1 second of depression, I will get in the way of it. And in that way, you are accommodating, and then the child becomes reliant and or dependent on that accommodation. Oh man, it's such a mistake. I'm telling you. Please, please, please learn from my mistakes there, because I didn't even know I was doing it for a very long time, for years and years and years. I didn't even know I was doing it, but I was. And it actually makes it so much harder on you as a parent to constantly accommodate. And it makes it hard for your kid, because there will be times, even if you want to be that human shield, even if you are fully dedicated to being the shield, there will be times where you can't protect them. They're going to feel shitty. They are. It's going to happen. You can't be with them all the time. Maybe it's at school. Maybe it's at a birthday party. Maybe it's, if they go to a summer camp or something. Maybe it's later in life, in high school, in college, they go away. Do kids still go away for college? I don't know. I think everybody lives with their parents till they're 35 now, right? It has nothing to do with that generation, by the way. It has to do with the fact that no one can afford a house. We should look into that strongly, is my opinion. But yeah, so you can't. So then they're going to be confronted with those feelings. They're not going to have the accommodation, and they're not going to know what to do, and they're going to freak out. And that's because you accommodated. I'm talking to myself right now. So don't accommodate. If you can avoid that, if you have very young kids and you haven't reached this part of dad's season, do whatever you can to avoid that. I would call it an accommodation loop, where you're constantly trying to accommodate to make sure your kid doesn't feel anxious or depressed. It's a no-win situation. You'll never accommodate enough. And the more you do it, the more you'll have to do it. Do you understand? Do you understand this concept? It's a very important concept. It's one I wish that someone would have punched me in the face and told me this 10 years ago. Well, I wish that they had told me this. I don't necessarily wish that they had punched me in the face. I've never been punched in the face. I know this is a shock to many of you who want to punch me in the face desperately, but I've never been punched in the face. I've gotten in one fight in my life, and that was during flag football in 9th grade. This kid kept tackling me. I mean, I'm just talking about like drilling me into the ground. Not going for my flag at all, just drilling me into the ground. Anyway, after like the 3rd or the 4th hit, I grabbed him by the shirt and I dragged him down and I punched him once, and then someone pulled me off. And here's the thing, that kid and I became friends because of the show of force. It was a great lesson to me as a 14-year-old, 13-year-old kid. Violence leads to friendship. You just have to show force. And then people will respect you. I'm kidding. I mean, that actually was my takeaway. But it didn't work in subsequent attempts. All right, last thing here from the book. All right, so you can't directly change your kids' beliefs about anxiety. Teaching and explaining are usually not powerful enough to change a child's beliefs, and your child may not be open to hearing from you about what she would think. I'm sorry. I'm going to try that again. Teaching and explaining are usually not powerful enough to change a child's beliefs, and your child may not be open to hearing from you about what she should think or believe, but you do have the power to indirectly impact your child's beliefs about anxiety. This is why the confidence element of support is so important, and also why protective responses can maintain the child's anxiety. Protective responses meaning the accommodation that I mentioned a minute ago. When your child looks at you and sees that you are completely confident that she can cope, it will have an impact on her and on what she believes. When your child sees that you are willing for her to feel anxious some of the time, she will also be able to become less afraid of feeling anxious. As her confidence grows, her need to avoid feeling anxious will get smaller. And a child who is willing to feel anxious some of the time is well on their way to not having an anxiety issue at all. It's hard. I mean, basically everything in parenting requires you to do the hard thing. There are no shortcuts. I've tried. Believe me, I've tried. I have looked for every possible shortcut there is to say, ha, I hacked the system, folks. But it turns out you can't. You can't hack the parenting system. It is unhackable. And so you're left with the hard thing all the time. And part of that hard thing here in this situation with your kid feeling anxious or depressed is letting them feel those feelings and expressing confidence, like the book says, that they can cope with it. And that's hard because you have to sit with them sometimes for a long time, multiple times. And you have to say, I believe in your ability to cope with this. This is really hard. This is hard. I'm not going to lie about it. I wish that I could take it from you, but I won't, and I can't. I won't because I can't. It's important that you learn how to cope with this on your own. And that will build resilience. Accommodating your kid's anxiety or depressive feelings will tear down any form of resilience that the child has. The term anti-fragile comes to mind. You want to make your kid anti-fragile when it comes to feeling these feelings, right? And if you're trying to protect them from it, you're ensuring that they are fragile, that these kids are fragile. And I promise, in the long run, even in the medium run, you're going to want to do the hard thing and teach them to cope with these feelings and express confidence in their ability to cope. It's important. It's important. All right, folks, that'll do it for episode 12 of the Dad Season Show. Like and subscribe on YouTube. Check it out on Spotify and or iTunes. You can also join the Dad Season Show Patreon. We have a couple posts per week. I'm trying to get some dialogue started. So jump in there if you want to support the show. So until next week, it remains Dad Season.